The legislation will then be debated on Tuesday in the House of Representatives. We intend to have that legislation pass the House before question time, which will occur at the normal time at 2 o'clock, and then will be considered by the Senate in the afternoon in order to ensure its passage on that day. The bill is the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate and Extremism. It's a comprehensive package of reforms which creates serious offences for hate preachers and leaders seeking to radicalise young Australians. It increases the penalties for hate crimes offences. It ensures that offenders whose crimes were motivated by extremism have that factored into their... It creates a new offence for inciting hatred in order to intimidate or harass. It expands and strengthens the ban on prohibited for Home Affairs to cancel or refuse a visa for people intent on spreading hate. And it creates a new framework that will enable the Minister for Home Affairs to list organisations as prohibited hate groups. Once an organisation is listed, it will be a criminal offence to be a member, to recruit for it, to donate or receive funds or support that group in any way. The legislation will also set up the National Guns Buyback Scheme, bringing Australia's world-leading gun laws into the 21st century and getting guns off our streets.
Australia is standing at a crossroads, and most people don't even realise the road behind them is already disappearing. They are calling it a hate speech bill. They are calling it protection. They are calling it progress. But every authoritarian system in history has always wrapped control in the language of compassion first. No government ever begins by announcing tyranny. It begins by announcing safety, not with tanks or soldiers, but with language, with definitions, with the power to decide what is acceptable thought and what is punishable speech. This bill gives the state the authority to decide what speech is harmful based on interpretation, not action. And the moment speech becomes a criminal category, instead of a moral or social one, freedom stops being a right and starts being a privilege. Australia is being told this won't go too far, that it will only target the worst cases, that it will only be used responsibly. The UK was told the same thing. And now, official UK police data shows around 30 people a day are being arrested for offensive online communications. More than 12,000 arrests a year for speech that didn't harm anyone physically, but crossed a line someone in power decided mattered. At the same time, the UK records more than 137,000 hate crime incidents a year, a number that keeps rising as definitions expand.
You're seeing it now in England where people are getting arrested for tweets.
Yeah. Well,
England, people talk about Soviet Russia, like how bad Russia is in terms of cracking down on thought police and cracking down on bad tweets and things like that. I think the statistics are, I think England I think there's something like 4,000 people have been arrested in England for thought crimes where they've said things online that people find to be a hateful thing or a problematic thing. And I think it's only 200 in Russia.
oh, wow.
The fact that they're comfortable with finding people who've said something that they disagree with and putting them in a fucking cage in England in 2024 is really wild.
Speech becomes behaviour. Behaviour becomes crime. This is what happens when law moves from actions to perceptions. Meanwhile, reality on the ground in Australia is going the opposite direction. In Victoria alone, official crime statistics show more than 640,000 criminal offences in a single year, the highest level in decades. Violent home invasions, robberies, carjackings, youth offenders dominate in serious categories. Machete-related assaults have increased dramatically over the last decade. People aren't feeling safer. They are feeling exposed. And while violent crime climbs, what does the government prioritise? Speech. Then what happened in Canberra? ACT police confirmed that multiple improvised explosive devices were found along public paths and common areas in Belconnen. Real devices in places where families walk, jog, and assume they are safe. Police warn the public not to touch anything suspicious because of the danger. That alone should have triggered a national reckoning. How did these get there? Who placed them? What failed? What systems didn't work? But instead of sustained public scrutiny on prevention and accountability, the tension quickly moved toward conversation, toward interpretation, speculation, and what people are allowed to say about it. Because in modern systems, danger itself isn't the greatest threat. Understanding is. And with what happened in Bondi, whether people frame it as terrorism, extremism, or mass violence, what is undeniable is that Bondi became a symbol of system failure. Investigations revealed serious questions about intelligence awareness, prior police contact, risk assessment, and how known warning signs were handled. Not all the facts are final yet. Not all reports are complete. But the pattern is familiar. A violent tragedy occurs, failures are exposed, and instead of deep reform, we get more laws, tougher speech laws, tighter gun restrictions, expanded powers to ban, monitor, and punish. Not accountability, control. And here's where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Australia does not have a castle law. If someone breaks into your home, you do not automatically have the legal right to defend yourself. You must use reasonable force. And that judgment is made later in a courtroom, not in the moment when your life is at risk. So look at the reality. Criminals carry knives. Criminals carry guns. And criminals place explosives, but ordinary citizens are told, don't defend too much. Don't speak too freely. Don't question too loudly. You are not trusted with speech. You are not trusted with self-defense. You are not trusted with interpretation. But you're expected to trust the system completely. And when the system fails, when bombs appear on streets, when violent crime rises, when intelligence gaps are exposed, the response is not humility. It is regulation of the public. Not upward accountability, downward control. And here's the truth no one wants to say. This isn't about protecting people. It's about protecting institutions. Speech becomes the first target because speech is the first form of resistance. Once the state can decide what you're allowed to say, it can decide what you're allowed to think. And when speech dies, accountability dies with it. Australia stands at a crossroads. One road leads to speech that is messy, uncomfortable, offensive and free. The other leads to silence that is polite, regulated and enforced. History tells us exactly where each road leads. Every empire that collapsed thought it was too advanced to fall. Rome thought its systems were permanent. Germany thought its order was righteous. The Soviet Union thought its ideology was inevitable. Every one of them believed their version of control was different. And every one of them began the same way. Not with violence, or laws, or definitions, or even language. They didn't begin by arresting criminals. They began by redefining what a criminal was. They didn't begin by banning truth. They began by labeling it dangerous. They didn't begin by silencing people. They began by teaching people to silence themselves. Orwell didn't write 1984 as a fantasy. He wrote it as a warning. The most terrifying part wasn't Big Brother watching. It was people adjusting themselves so he didn't have to. They changed their words, their thoughts, their memories, not because they were forced, but because they were afraid. Today, we are told speech is harm. Disagreement is violence. Silence is kindness. And slowly, without realizing it, people begin editing themselves. They stop questioning, challenging, speaking. Not because the government demanded it, but because the environment trained them to. This is how freedom actually dies. Not in a moment, not in a headline, but in the slow disappearance of courage. Australia is not immune. Australia is simply late in the cycle, and late is the most dangerous stage. Because people still believe nothing can go wrong. Freedom is not lost when the last law is passed. It is lost when the first one is accepted without resistance. When speech becomes conditional, when thought becomes monitored, when silence becomes safer than honesty. The question is not whether Australia will choose freedom or control. The question is, how many people will still be brave enough to speak once that choice is no longer theoretical? Because once speech is managed, everyone else follows. And by the time people realize what has happened, history will already be repeating itself.